welcome to the Grim and Whimsy YouTube channel. This is going to be a video eventually about how to have a simple character sheet for not only Dungeons & Dragons, but all tabletop gaming, and maybe especially for newcomers like kids. This is going to be my public thing with Grim and Whimsy, but you can also head on over to patreon.com/Grim and Whimsy, and you can get a lot more content because I'm developing some bigger projects. Like I'm going to have some original game settings that maybe come with their own gaming rules. And I'm also going to adapt one of my podcasts, my Dungeons & Dragons podcast, Nerd Poker, that I share with some very funny comedian friends of mine. I'm going to adapt one of the adventures I made as a dungeon master for everyone. I'm going to have it be a, full illustrated Dungeons & Dragons module eventually. And I'm really excited to do that because my favorite kind of tabletop role-playing is when the game master or dungeon master, whoever, creates a world from scratch and delivers that to their friends. I think that is the most fun way to play. And I hope that kind of informs a little bit where I'm going with Grim and Whimsy because, I just have a lot of universes, continents, weird magic physics in my head that I would really like to share with people. And I think tabletop role-playing is really fun and accessible, especially compared to video games. I love video games, but I find I mostly end up playing No Man's Sky, kind of like a wind down, wander around video game, because when it comes to fast-paced strategy, I get real tired of it real quick because sometimes I lose. And I can be a very competitive person, but I don't find that side of myself super enjoyable because my blood pressure goes up and I'm like, why is it not my turn to win yet? That's something I learned in GoldenEye 64 in ye old 1990s. So really excited to share this particular little idea that I had with you, which is Dungeons & Dragons is really easy to adapt for kids. It's really easy to play tabletop role-playing games with kids. But I remember when I was first introduced to it, it was via a monster manual that my brother had left out. I picked it up and was like, this book full of monsters is fantastic. What are all these numbers? Oh my God, I don't know how to use the numbers. What, I need dice? Okay, how many kinds of dice? And it was too much for my brain to handle. Perhaps because I had more of an audio style of learning than pencil and paper, but eventually I figured it out. And looking back, I really felt like there were nerdy gatekeepers who did not particularly speak to my kind of nerd. There was a gaming store near me in Homewood, Illinois called Fiction House, and some of my nerd friends have very quaint memories of Fiction House and the lovely people who worked there. But my memory of Fiction House was going there to buy comic books. And then when it came for Dungeons & Dragons, being like, hey, I want to play Dungeons & Dragons. Which book should I get? What do I need to learn? What dice do I need? And the people who worked there always did the same thing. And it made me tune out and not want to talk to them anymore. They would always go, and then start talking. You should never do that to a person. That would happen to me too when I would work in tech support with computers. I would always try to be the tech support guy who was not rolling their eyes and sighing deeply when someone came to me with a problem. It's just kind of rude. Kind of makes me go okay, why do I have to be an outcast in a situation where, if I'm playing tabletop role-playing games, there's a reasonable chance that I was an outcast at some point in my life. So I really like to remove some of the barriers, and I have kids, and I talked about on my podcast how I played Dungeons & Dragons with my kids when they were pretty young, and some people were wondering and would let me know via the podcast's community, well, how do I play with kids? I think it's really easy. Okay, the best way you can play with kids is from the very beginning, find out why they want to play. I really like to introduce them to all the fantasy aspects of it, and then be like, okay, well, here's some of your options. Who do you want to be? And to me, the character sheet is the biggest obstacle for introducing a newcomer to Dungeons. I like to have a nice little bag of dried onions, which I call Junjuns, when I'm snacking at the gaming table. I think of the Dungeons & Dragons character sheet as the biggest obstacle in getting a newcomer to play. And I try to think of kids the same way I think of adults when it comes to learning a new thing, no matter how young they are. You got to remove the barriers that keep them from understanding it. And I love a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet. Like, it's great. I really do. I think it's fun, and you can see me kind of wincing a little bit because every time I look at it, I also think of just how impenetrable it looked to me. First of all, there's 3 pages, which if I'm learning something new, like a board game, I want to know how to play it quickly. You know, I remember when I had to learn to play the Jaws board game for my podcast because we were going to play on a bonus episode. We were all like, wait, we've been describing the rules to this for half an hour. Oh my Lord. And this is a lot. You don't even get to draw your character till the second page. And I don't remember that even being an option in earlier editions of the game. And this stack of skills always melted my head. I was like, okay, I get it. You have to take some number from dexterity and move it over for acrobatics. And it says like to help you dexterity, but then there's all kinds of bonuses depending on what species or class you are that could additionally add to acrobatics, but only acrobatics. And then there's these little numbers that end up being next to all these things to let you know what to add to the dice to get your number that has to beat a number. Pretty simple concept to explain to somebody that you roll a dice and you have to beat a number. But with that many categories, and you know, the 20-sided dice is kind of central to D&D, but all these other kinds of dice, it can be a lot. Growing up, you're probably really only going to see a 6-sided dice, right? Maybe your grandpa's got a gambling problem and they're laying all over the house. You can steal one of those, no problem. But to have to go and buy like a set of gaming dice, which are beautiful most of the time now, very easy to find in a general consumer sense, they're just simply a lot. Especially numbers if you're not a number person. So it can be intimidating. And I find, first of all, have them draw their character. You can give them a blank piece of paper. You could do anything with it. But just something, I like something real simple where like a big featured corner of it is you just like right on the first page, draw what do you want them to look like. Decide what species they are. Decide what class they are. But also just like if it's a kid, just be like, what job do they have? You don't have to be a paladin. You know, I really think that aspect of the game, the rules of like your options, if they work, great. If they are not appealing or they're confusing, take a step back. You don't want to really learn what a warlock, a paladin, a cleric, artificer is all in one sitting before you play a game for the first time. So maybe they become one eventually, but let them get like addicted to it and like excited about it before you start dumping that on them. And then let's talk about the dice. I like to start off with just 2 dice. Again, you stole your grandpa's 6-sided dice. They're everywhere, but like 20-sided dice, especially if you're playing D&D, that's going to get them used to the idea of no matter how complicated the rules get, this is your buddy. You're going to want one of these. And then I break it down into only 2 categories and everything's blank and you don't need like the rules for any of this, right? This is my stuff, what I'm learning. This is your skills and your inventory. And see, my stuff, 6-sided dice. What I'm learning, 20-sided dice. And there's no, you can bust out a D&D book and be like, well, you could put acrobatics as something you're learning. You could be stealth, something you're learning. But it could be cooking bacon. It could be playing with chipmunks. If your kid or person who's a newcomer is obsessed with that part of making a character, let them build that up. And each time they win a roll, like let's say you tell them, oh, you want to play with this chipmunk. You're going to want to do that more often. Let's make that one of what you're learning. Let's write down plays with chipmunks. And if you succeed this roll, if you beat the number that I've figured out for you, and you can tell them or not, say it's a 12, and then they can roll a 13. You let them add +1 to their plays with chipmunks, and they're gonna get so excited. They're gonna get their sheet out and be like, "Wait, you're telling me that's like a thing I'm learning, and now next time I do it, I get a +1?" And they're gonna write, plays with. I get to do this chipmunks on my character sheet, and they get to put a +1. They're gonna be so stoked to have this be a part of their game. Hopefully, they can write like better and more legibly than I just did. But, you know, to have that be on your character sheet right by their little drawing of what their character looks like can be pretty cool. And then the six-sided, if they succeed with it and it correlates to one of their stuff, you just write all your stuff here. Like, let's say you do want to add a combat element to it and they pick up a stick. So you put a stick. You don't put a number next to it yet. But then they say they want to hit a monster with a stick. And so you go, okay, so that's something you're learning. Hitting monsters with sticks, and you write that down. That's something else you're learning, right? At least, do you think you want to do it again? You're not sure? Why not put it there for now and write in pencil, you know? So hit monsters with sticks. Again, I'm learning just how legible I have to be for YouTube. But you haven't put that down there, and you put a stick up there, and then if they succeed a number, sure, not only do they get a +1 here, but they get a +1 with their stick. And you're like, okay, so they succeed 11 times. They get to like a +11. That's where you, as the veteran player who is running the game, get to say, all right, we're going to limit this particular thing to a +6. Time to learn something new if you want to expand something. You can keep hitting things with a stick with +6. But if you're hungry for more options, time to pick up something else to hit monsters with, or learn something else in general, because this should be about problem solving. That's what Dungeons and Dragons really is. You're trying to get out of a dungeon and solve the problem of having a person eating dragon in front of you. So what I'm learning helps you solve problems. Your stuff is a tool for solving your problems. That's it. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is. That's what tabletop role playing can be at its core. Not always, but sometimes. And so I think having it be this simple, and let's say your character's name is Jim Jamboree, right? And they are a humanoid chipmunk. So you're like, okay, I'm going to draw a little humanoid chipmunk that's holding a stick, and that is their weapon, right? But also they like to play, and they've got a cape. So they've got I'll draw a little cape on them. Aren't you excited to play Jim Jamboree, the chipmunk? If you're a kid and you came up with that yourself, that is, I think, more exciting than trying to teach someone who's 6 the beginnings of it. Even showing somebody who's never played Dungeons and Dragons before this, it can hurt their skull brain. They're going to be like, all right, I want to learn it. It looks cool, but already they're going to see obstacles in front of them. Why not give them something real simple that you can explain in just a few minutes? And hey, if you like the sound of that, if you're like, Dan, I see you waving this thing around. Where do I get this? That's where I tell you, if you subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/Grim and Whimsy, I've got that for download if you subscribe at the basic level of $5. Now, is it my first foray into downloadable content here with my first video? Yes. Yes, it is. And I'm learning how to lay stuff out with my friend Duncan. Duncan is my assistant and also my cat. And he is part Bengal, so he walks into the doorway like talking to you, going, oh, I hear your voice. That voice must be for me. You're talking to me, right? And so during my videos, it's inevitable, no matter how much I end up editing them, that Duncan here is going to start meowing because he thinks I'm talking to him. He's, hey, do you have anything to contribute? Do you want to be my intern? Do you want to be like VP level exec? No, you don't get to sharpen your claws on my pleather seat. What are you doing, buddy? You want to come up? Want to say hi to YouTube? Oh, he loves to talk. And he's also part ragdoll, so when you pick him up, he just will kind of go like this. Hey, buddy. Anyway, I really hope that you got something out of watching this video. I do think it can be pretty simple to introduce Dungeons & Dragons or TTRPGs to somebody who's never played before, regardless of their age range or their experience. All you got to do is take away obstacles for them. And something like a character sheet, like I'm trying to produce, could really help. So if you do subscribe to Patreon, I hope you get a kick out of the gaming materials that I post there week to week. And I hope even more so that once I start posting big projects there, like game settings, that you'll get to enjoy how I've developed them over a long period of time too. So thank you for joining me here at YouTube. And hopefully I'll see you over at Patreon too. Bye.